Hey, welcome. It's Vince Spompanato with North Star Insurance Advisors. And today I'm going to do a quick training on the 7 types of sales questions that I believe that every agent should be incorporating into their sales process for Final Expense Telesales or telesales in general, or even sales. If you're a salesperson and you have a sales process, I want to cover with you 7 types of different questioning, lines of questioning that you should be building into your sales process and utilizing with awareness. So I'm going to wait for a few people to jump on here before I get started. I hope you're all doing well. I know I'm feeling good today. I wanted to share this content with you. If you're in sales or you're thinking about getting into sales, you want to make sure that you're working with a company that has a great sales process, and then start utilizing and formulating these 7 types of questions that I'm going to share with you today. So let's see who we got jumping on here real quick. Josh West, Bill Bodell, Francisco, what's going on, my man? I'm going to give you some great tips on how to ask questions in your sales process today. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. There's 7 different types of sales questions that every sales rep needs to know. Now, I sell final expense insurance 100% over the telephone. We've developed a proprietary sales process for our reps, and we train our reps on these different types of questions. But I wanted to share them with you and share them with the Facebook group, Final Expense Telesales Revolution. So here's the first one. The first type of questions that you need to be incorporating into your sales process is fact-finding questions. Fact-finding questions give you more insight in background or context into your prospect's current situation. Now, although these questions are helpful for learning more about your buyer's situation, the buyer doesn't necessarily benefit from these types of questions. After all, they're basically reciting information back to you that they already know. You're asking them facts about their current situation or about their life. So it's not the most fun thing for a prospect to answer. So you must be cognizant of not asking too many questions in a row and coming across as interrogating the prospect. If you're asking too many fact-finding questions in a row, it can damage your credibility, and it can really upset the prospect. It can get them so upset that they don't want to talk to you anymore. And I teach a method within my organization called the 3-in-1 method. And I'll just give you a basic understanding of what that means. When you're asking fact-finding questions, you don't want to ask more than 3 of them in a row without giving them something back, okay? That's the 1. So you ask 3 fact-finding questions, and then you give them something back. That's the 1. And what that does is it allows you to break the pattern of interrogating them. So that 1 thing that you're giving back is basically you're relating back to however they answered those questions. And this creates more of a natural rapport and a natural conversation while you're still collecting the appropriate facts that are needed to make the sale. So I'd like to give you an example of some fact-finding questions, and I'm going to base this around what I do, which is final expense insurance 100% over the phone. So for instance, if I'm warming up to a customer, I may ask them, how long have you been living in the beautiful state of Missouri? Okay, that's the first question. I'm trying to learn about their location. And the second question may be, well, what brought you to Missouri? What brought you down to Missouri? Okay, and then the third question might be, Did the rest of your family move down there with you? Because I'm trying to learn about their family. I'm trying to learn about their location, what brought them there. Now, after they've answered those 3 questions and I've gathered those facts, I'm going to relate back to them with my current situation. I could say, you know, that's awesome. So you moved down to Missouri. I have a similar situation. I moved from Michigan to Texas, and give them a little bit of background on me so it's more of a natural conversation. So you want to learn how to use fact-finding questions without sounding like an interrogator. That's the first type of question that you need to make sure you're implementing into your sales process. Now, the second type of question that you want to utilize are what I call goal assessment questions. Once you know what your prospect's goals are, you can start to demonstrate how your product will help them achieve their goals, okay? So we want to make sure we're asking goal assessment questions. Now, you can use goal assessment questions after you've learned some facts in the discovery process, okay? You want to make sure that you learn about what your prospect is trying to accomplish. And these questions should be very straightforward, okay? There shouldn't be a lot of fluff around this stuff. And you should only do this after you've got the customer or prospect's guard down. You don't want to start asking them what their goals are until you've got them talking, until you've learned a little bit about your customer. And then you can start to ask them some pretty straightforward goal assessment questions. Now, if you sell Final Expense like I do and like our company does over the telephone, you could ask questions like this to learn about what their goals are. You could say, you know, so tell me, Mr. Prospect, why is getting this type of coverage so important to you? Why is getting this type of coverage so important to you? Notice we're trying to learn about what their goal is here. Why is this important to them? And by doing that, we're going to be able to then help them. We're going to be able to learn a little bit more about their hot buttons. Now, once we've learned about their goal or why this is important to them, then we can start asking what I call priority questions. Now, priority questions are well-crafted questions that are designed to identify the buyer's important objectives, okay? So they're similar to goal-oriented questions, but we want to learn the priority here, okay? The hot buttons, maybe some of their challenges, what's going on here. And these are fantastic follow-up questions to goal assessment questions, okay? So you want to start asking these priority-based questions after you've learned some facts about them, after you've learned what their goals are, why this is important to them. And I want to make a side note here. And by the way, as we're going through this, if you have questions about what I'm talking about here, make sure that you type them into me, because when I'm done going through all these questions, I'll be happy to answer any questions live on this stream here. Unfortunately, what happens with a lot of priority questions is that most salespeople, or a lot of amateur salespeople, I should say, not most salespeople, but a lot of people that are learning sales will assume that they already know what the prospect's priorities are based on their previous customers. And this is to their detriment. You don't want to assume that you know what your customer's priorities are. That is a big, big mistake, and it can cost you the sale. And if you don't probe into your prospect's high-level concerns and priorities, you could potentially base your entire sales process, your entire call on the wrong strategy. Or you could talk to them about what isn't important to them, or what's not a priority to them, and of course that's going to cost you to lose the sale. So I want to give you an example of a good priority question, and that could be something like this. Okay, remember, I sell final expense insurance 100% over the telephone. So I'm using questions that I would use in our sales process. So something I would say for a priority question would be, Mr. Prospect, what are you most focused on achieving with having this type of protection in place? What's most important to you when you get this type of coverage in place? Okay. Or another question could be, hey, Mr. Prospect, help me define what is the best policy or qualities of a policy, or what would the best policy look like for you? Okay. And so you're asking these open-ended questions. Okay. You want to avoid, when you're asking priority questions, you want to avoid asking closed-ended questions, which can influence your prospect response. They could, if you just ask a closed-ended question, they could just say yes or no or this or that, and then you don't really get into a conversation around their priorities. For instance, it's better to ask, how important, Mr. Prospect, how important is fixing the fact that you don't have coverage right now? See how open that is? It's going to make them talk. How important, Mr. Prospect, is fixing the fact that you don't have any coverage in place right now? Rather than asking a question like, is fixing not having coverage important? Or is fixing not having coverage a top priority to you? They're just going to say, of course, yes or no. It's not going to spark any type of conversation. And these types of questions will help reveal new information or ideas to the buyer. So, when you start to ask questions like this, they start to verbalize and think about and reframe their existing view of whatever's going on, okay? So these need to be thought-provoking. You want to identify their priorities here so that as you're moving through the process, you're able to build on it. All right, so the fourth type of question is exactly that. It's thought-provoking questions, okay? So let me give you a couple examples of some thought-provoking questions that you could ask. Before I do that, I want you guys to know that most thought-provoking questions will start with, did you know, or have you heard? Things like that, or are you aware of? You want to get them thinking, okay? So you could use a question in final expense sales over the telephone. You could say, Mr. Prospect, did you know that only 55% of people in your age bracket actually have this type of coverage in place? Did you know that? And they're going to start talking to you, and they're going to start, wow, no, I didn't know that. Why do you think that is? And they're going to start talking to you. Or you could say, Mr. Prospect, have you considered what would happen to your husband if you didn't have, or your wife if you didn't have this coverage in place? I mean, have you considered what would happen? Again, it's gonna get them thinking about it. And you want them to start thinking about this stuff. Okay? By doing that, it's gonna start sparking up emotions with them. They're going to go, oh no, I mean, that would be terrible if my wife didn't have this coverage in place. I mean, how would she pay for my funeral? Or it would get them, really thinking about it. The fifth type of question that you want to incorporate into your sales process are what I call hypothetical questions. Now, these questions are to help your prospect realize the true cost of inaction, okay? They're designed to create some urgency, okay? So you want to pose some hypothetical questions requiring them to think about their future without your product or without your solution. Now, in my case, it's life insurance protection for their final expenses. So I may ask a question like, tell me, Mr. Prospect or Mrs. Prospect, how would your husband pay for your funeral if you didn't have this type of coverage in place? Okay, So this is a tough question. A lot of people are going to be like, I don't know. I'm glad we're talking today. It's going to get them on the train of, get in line with getting coverage today. Another question you could say, if God forbid, Sally, God forbid you were to die in an accident, a car accident tomorrow, how would your daughter pay for your funeral? So you can see, like, these questions, they're hypothetical questions, but they create a lot of, like, they make the customer think. Now, those are some pretty negative things, okay? Like, you don't have to pose all hypothetical questions in a negative format. You can pose them in a positive format. So a positive hypothetical question could lead your prospect to imagine a better future, okay? So it could make them feel good. Now, to craft a positive hypothetical, you must know the buyer's specific pain, okay? You got to know what their specific pain point is to craft a good question, a good positive hypothetical question. So in this case, we could say, Sally, imagine, you die in your old age. You live a great life. You die in your sleep in your old age, and you put this coverage in place today for your daughter. How do you think she will feel knowing that you thought about her, 20 years prior to put this type of coverage in place? How do you think she's going to feel to know that you did this for her and she's got this money when she needs it the most, when she's grieving? How do you think she's going to feel? So you see, it makes her feel good to know that she's doing this for her daughter today. And it's giving you a good response. It's getting her on that train of thinking, like, I'm going to do this today, okay? Now, what about the sixth type of question, which is what I call clarifying questions, okay? Now, clarifying questions let you check in with the buyer, right? And they help make sure that you're coming to the right conclusions, that you're both on the same page. And since you're confirming the buyer or the prospect's past answers rather than looking for new ones, these questions are usually closed-ended, okay? So they don't have to always be open-ended. For example, let me give you a couple examples. I'm gonna, just like role play with you for a second. So this is the agent or the rep. I would say, have you attempted to get this type of coverage in place in the past? Have you been thinking about this and tried to get this type of coverage in the past? And then the customer says something like, yeah, I tried to get it in the past a couple times. I just couldn't afford it. Or, I tried to get it in the past and the insurance company turned me down because I'm a diabetic. They give you an answer like that. And then you, the rep, would say something like, well, I just want to make sure that I understand you correctly. In the past few years, you've tried to get coverage a few times, but it was just not affordable at the time. And then there were some times when you applied, but you got turned down due to the fact that you're a diabetic. Is that correct? So you're just reaffirming or you're confirming what they've already told you. You're getting them to say yes. And it helps you clarify it. It helps them feel like you're listening to them, and it gets them on the same page as you. All right, the last type of question, and if you guys have questions for me about this training, feel free to type them in the questions pane for me, because after I'm done here, I'll be happy to answer your questions. But the last type of question that you should be incorporating into your sales process are what I call objection surfacing questions or concern surfacing questions. And I get it. It can be nerve-wracking to explore a buyer's objections or to explore their concerns or to bring them up. But listen, if you don't do these things, if you don't get their concerns, if you don't get their objections out on the table or up front, you're going to be struggling in the end, okay? You want to make sure that you get all of their objections or all of their concerns addressed prior to closing or quoting them the insurance, okay? When you sense that a prospect is not completely comfortable with something, or they haven't bought into your insurance product, or they're expressing some sort of concern, or you're just feeling that, you want to make sure you're addressing that with objection servicing questions. So, for example, you may say, hey, Mr. Prospect, listen, I'm sensing that there may be a little bit of hesitation. Am I off base to think that you may not be fully on board here? Okay, so you're trying to get them to tell you that they're not on board, okay? Another question could be like, you know, Mr. Prospect, tell me, what reservations, if any, do you have about getting this coverage in place today? Okay, now you want to be doing this before you are quoting them or before you're presenting the solution, okay, or the pricing. You don't want to be doing this after the fact, okay? It's too late at that point. These questions are going to help you identify and expose hidden objections in the final stages of your sales process. So after the features and benefits section of your process, you know, you want to be exploring these types of questions. You might want to say things like, you know, do you have any concerns about the product that I've just presented to you? Do you have any concerns? Okay, or what are the areas that you feel least comfortable with regarding what I've just shown you? And you're going to get varying different responses here, but the goal is to identify any potential objection or concern that could pop up in the end that you didn't address before you've quoted. So I hope this was helpful to you. I haven't really looked at any of the comments that have come in, but let me take a look. Are there any comments, or does anybody have any questions about what I've covered here today? Good. Well, hey, I've enjoyed my time here today. I hope this training was helpful to you. Make it a great day, and I'll be on to give you more valuable information for your sales quest. Talk to you soon.